Pit lane pitfalls, Max's heartbreak, and Hulkenberg's heart attack. I'm Josh, and you're in the second seat. Welcome back, ladies and gents, to another episode of the Second Seat podcast. I'm really happy to be with you again today after what was a bit of a mixed bag feelings and emotions from the weekend at Zandvoort. Disappointing to see that such an incredible track has dropped off from the F1 calendar. I personally enjoy Zandvoort. I think from a driver's perspective, it's an incredible track to see how they tackle it. Yes, it's difficult to overtake, but similar to Monaco, it's between you and the track, and you've got to find those moments where you can take advantage and get in front of your opponents. So lots to talk about today. First and foremost, though, well done to George and Lando for their respective sprint and Grand Prix wins. Lando in particular, doing really well, bookending wins GP-wise, both Hungary and now Zandvoort, so back-to-back wins for him. Before we get into the rest of it, though, I just want a bit of a self-pat on the back with the news that Max Verstappen has re-signed or extended until 2030 with Red Bull. For all intents and purposes, said that was going to occur. Not the time frame, but I did highlight that he was going to stay with Red Bull last week in that episode. But I also said that Carlos Sainz would stay with Williams, and that came out over the weekend as well. In particular, the day after Alex Albon had confirmed that he had re-signed with Williams too. So effectively a non-silly season in that regard, and I expect that the likes of Audi and all the other teams will largely stay the same, and the only change that I think will occur is that of Esteban Ocon at the end of the season being let go by Haas. So interesting to see what occurs in that space in terms of Ocon, but who knows? One potential suitor for them could be our Kiwi brother, Liam Lawson, who I think had an absolutely incredible weekend, a fair bit of deja vu for him, coming into Zandvoort, into the senior team, because a fellow driver had hurt part of their hand. In this instance, Isaac Hadjar hurting his wrist over the summer break during a boxing incident. Liam, for those of you that don't know, made his debut at Zandvoort in 2023 due to Daniel Ricciardo breaking his hand after beating it into the wall to avoid Oscar Piastri at turn 3, that is. So for Liam, a bit of a glitch in the matrix side of things, but he did really well, I think, driving the RB22 for the first time this weekend. Yes, the powertrains are the same, but that doesn't affect the way the drivers interact with the car, as opposed to the chassis side. That is far more influential, and coming to grips with the differences in balance and all the rest of it between the RB22 and the Racing Bulls car would have been a good challenge for Liam, and I think he did it. I think he handled it really, really well. He was within certainly a few tenths of Max during FP1, and then both sprint qualifying and the sprint race itself. In qualifying for the Grand Prix, it was less than 1.5 tenths off Max, and I think he drove really well to stay in the points, finishing P7 during the Grand Prix in and of itself. He was feeling racy from the get-go in the Grand Prix. He was taking it to Max, certainly trying to go around the outside a couple of times and highlight that, yes, I might only be here for a single weekend, but I'm going to make the most of this opportunity. And I feel like he did that. I feel like Liam had basically shrugged off the demons from, being in the Red Bull colours from 2025. He certainly highlighted that he didn't feel that the 2 races that he got on tracks that he'd never been at before was not justifiable in terms of him being released, and it didn't really showcase what he was capable of. So for him to come out this weekend and in my mind, absolutely nail it, is vindication for him. And I know that's the second time I've used that word this episode, but he should feel really validated and feel really confident going back into the Racing Bulls seat, whether that's from Monza or later in the season, depending on the injury to Isaac. Feeling justified that he is going to retain at least his seat at Racing Bulls. And if that doesn't remain the case, he's certainly shown the rest of the field and the rest of the Formula One teams that he deserves to be in Formula One, particularly if Red Bull decide to bring Solov up and replace Liam with him, which I still think would be an absolute shame and the wrong decision again. But have to wait and see. I know Solov's doing really well in Formula 2 this year, but that's no guarantee that he'll perform well in Formula 1. So wait and see. If he does lose his seat, obviously I mentioned Ocon potentially going from Haas. That's really the only other option for Liam at this stage, but he has done other racing series before. He, should have won the German Touring Series DTM in his rookie season, and a few other bits and pieces. So he's got the skills to go elsewhere. I'd love for him to stay in Formula One, though, as I think a lot of other people would. But Liam should rest assured that he did himself proud, the region proud, and in particular his country proud. So well done, mate. Keep up the amazing work. Speaking of countrymen, Oscar Piastri, a mixed bag weekend for him, showed glimpses of some real improvement. Certainly his one lap pace was great, much closer to Lando this weekend comparatively to certainly Hungary, where he got very, very limited time with the upgrade package. So, a bit of simulator work and a bit of time on track across FP1 and the sprint races. Sorry, the sprint race highlights that, he certainly got the skill and the speed to keep up with the reigning world champion from a one-lap perspective. I don't think he extracted the fullness from the car during qualifying. There's definitely room for improvement there, and I think Oscar's even highlighted that himself. There's definitely an ability for him to go quicker than Lando. It's just about understanding again. He's got to change his driving style to suit these new regulations, and he's slowly doing that. George is very similar in that instance. Where Oscar has been struggling has been the race pace over that full Grand Prix distance. Still not sort of able to keep it at a higher level yet, but there's been glimpses of him across the year certainly being able to do that. Japan was an excellent example and is probably still his best race so far this season. I felt like Spa was also a really good race for Oscar. The only reason he didn't finish on the podium is that collision with Leclerc and the impact that collision had on his aero. On the aerodynamics side, he was losing sort of between 5 and 7 tenths speed per lap, and that's a lot over the course of certainly 40 laps in this instance for Spa. So, bit to work on for Oscar, but he's certainly on the up and up. And I think, towards the back end of the season, if he can get on top of the regulations, get on top of his driving style, there's definitely potential for him to at least get a couple of podiums, if not a win. So what I think needs to happen outside of Oscar's self-improvement is wider team improvement, certainly on respectively his side of the garage as much as the pit wall is both sides. So the strategy that was implemented for Oscar during Zandvoort was poor. His tire management was pretty decent. there was no need in my mind to cover off on George Russell after only 16 laps on the hard tyre. Oscar had highlighted that, it felt pretty similar to the medium side. His pace was very similar to that of Lando and Kimi, who were out in front. He wasn't really losing touch with them. He'd opened up a gap to George of about 2 seconds before George pitted. And, whilst George would have been on fresher tyres and had, 16 lap offset, there wasn't a huge amount in all of that that suggested that George would have caught him enough to force the pit stop. So McLaren were too cautious, should have left Oscar out and run long, reduced the number of pit stops. He had 4 pit stops across the entirety of that Grand Prix, which in my mind was just ridiculous. So it was disappointing to see him on the wrong end of strategy again, and that was similar to Hungary, and it's happened a couple of other times this season. Part of that, for me, puts it down to his relationship with Tom Stallard and Tom's approach of team first. Will Joseph does everything he can to get Lando the win, the podium, whatever he can do to do the best for him. I don't get that impression from Tom Stallard. So, whether or not, McLaren or Oscar asks for that to change, or Oscar leaves McLaren for greener pastures, so to speak, and there's not really much on the horizon in that space at the moment. The other positive I took from Oscar is his racecraft remains impeccable. That kid can pick an overtaking spot with the best of all of them. Like his overtake on George, a really obscure place to do it again, similar to taking Hamilton at Eau Rouge, in Spa, and some of the other places that he's done it to. So he's still racy. He still looks for the gap that and takes it where he can see it and goes for it from there. So I think he hasn't lost that skill. It's just a matter of getting used to these regulations and going from there. And it's similar to Max Verstappen's also having issues with these current regs. George is having issues with these current regs. And if you look at the likes of Lewis Hamilton, he struggled under the regs between 2021 and 2025. So, it happens with all the drivers. We just need to take a bit of time and let Oscar find his feet and go from there. Speaking of strategies, though, Ferrari and Mercedes, really intriguing decisions from their pit walls. Ferrari, you would have seen potentially Lewis getting upset about their lack of interference or team orders. Rather, he was much quicker than Charles in the early stages of the race, wanted to be let past so that he could chase, and I think he was in a position to chase. Compared to Kimi, and I'll touch on Kimi's piece in a moment, but what the team hadn't done and, hadn't set up any code words or anything like that to highlight to Lewis that they wanted him to run long. That's where it got screwed over. And Ferrari, I think, need to be a bit more direct, not worry about upsetting their drivers so much or trying to make them both happy. Like they don't want to be McLaren and have their own version of papaya rules here. They just want to get in, and they need to start looking at how they can fight for the win rather than keeping both the drivers happy and finishing P5 and 6 all the time, because that's what they're going to end up with, which would be disappointing for everyone involved. Mercedes, on the other hand, I think that was a really, really poor decision to have Kimi and George swap in the latter stages of the race. There was only about 11 laps to go. Lando was commensurately that many seconds in front as well, as far as I recall. Kimi, yes, he was on a brand new set of softs compared to Lando being on old hard tyres. George, again, was also on old hard tyres, but George wasn't losing ground to Lando. Kimi didn't gain anything on Lando either after that swap occurred. What did happen, though, was Lando increased pace. Kimi kept in step with Lando, but left his teammate behind, that decision was the second poor decision in my mind, because it then left George open to a very fast finishing Lewis and Charles Leclerc, and Mercedes could have lost out on a double podium. It was only for George's A, incredible driving, B, difficulty for overtaking at Zandvoort that they managed to hold on. But in my mind, like, that was a 6-point swing in Kimi's favor that didn't need to occur. There was no team benefit to be gained by swapping those two around. Yes, it would have left Kimi open to challenges from Lewis and Charles, but again, the challenge was overtaking. So, if they really wanted to play the team game, it would have been, we're going to swap you and we're going to have Kimi keep you within a second to ensure you get the extra 50 kilowatts of boost per lap so that you guys can pull away potentially from Lewis and Charles. And then as we get close, we'll swap you back and let George take the P2 because he had earned that right in my mind. Instead, certainly from the external side of things, it looks like Toto is already, and has been in my mind, but is favouring Kimi, banking points ahead of Monza, where we know that they're going to take a grid penalty for Kimi due to a change in engine. Kimi will thrive in somewhere like Monza. It's a track that suits him in particular and his driving style. So for him, I could see him qualifying pole and then really starting only from P11, which from a points perspective, he will easily get back up into certainly the mid-level of points, if not, potentially fight for P3 and go from there. So, if I was George, I would be really frustrated, but kudos to him for playing the team game and being a really positive team player about it. Yes, he questioned it and said, is Kimi fighting for the win? They didn't show the response, but ultimately the answer was no. Kimi was not fighting for the win and should never have been swapped in the first place. So, yeah, pit lanes really poor across the board for mine. This weekend, I think obviously there's a lot of people coming back still on summer break mentally, including the pit crews, because there were some atrocious pit stops across the teams over the weekend. And if you saw the top 10 fastest times of the top 4 teams, as in McLaren, Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari, only 2 instances of their pit stops made it into the top 10 times. So for whatever reason, I think the top 4, the big 4 rather, are still a bit sleepy and waking up, and hopefully they, certainly for their drivers, they come back with a bit of gusto in Monza and can sort themselves out. So, yeah. Interesting pit lane activities across the course of the weekend. Speaking of interesting activities, it looks like to me Carlos Sainz has shifted from attacking his rivals on track and taking them out to taking his teammate Alex Albon out, which occurred in the Grand Prix. I don't know what's happening there. Bit of a weird situation. I understand the lockup and sort of ran into it from there. But yeah, Carlos, if you're not happy at Williams, maybe take a look elsewhere and go from there. But yeah, I felt for Alex Albon in that instance, but who I really felt for over the weekend was Max. He was my tip to win, but unfortunately the home race curse continues. The reason I thought he was going to win is the original forecast of rain across all 4 days, but the rain turned out to be more anxious than a mouse in an elephant field. So, it didn't turn out that way, but it was the rain that actually did Max in. There was a bit of a wet patch in the latter part of turn 14. Max applied the accelerator and in an area that he thought was drying, and it wasn't. that caught the rear out and he lost it. And as you know, the rest is history. Binned it and went from there. So really disappointing for him. He was frustrated with the car across FP1 and sprint qualifying and the sprint race itself. So a bit of work to do for the Red Bull team leading into Monza. They would have got some good data out of Liam for the Grand Prix distance side of things. But yeah, I really felt for Max. It was a really disappointing way for him to end his time at Zandvoort with a DNF. So hopefully things can be on the up and up for him for the remainder of the year. Yes, I realise he's half Belgian and he still has the Spa Grand Prix, but that's, next year is its final year before it has a break in 2028 and then comes back for 2029. So it's a rotational thing there. So, yeah, what was crazy though was Hulkenberg's reaction time to Gabby Bortoletto. So literally milliseconds after Max's shunt into the wall coming onto the main straight and then literally crossing the track or sliding back across the track in that broken car, Gabby Bortoletto lost it in pretty much the same position, but managed to effectively copy his sim racing pals in terms of Verstappen, copy Verstappen's spin at Miami earlier this year, saved it, didn't hit anyone miraculously, and Hulk driving through that thick plume of smoke and missing Gabby's front end by mere millimeters. Like, if you haven't seen that, you need to do yourself a favor and go and look at that on board, because if Hulk decided to go the other direction or Gabby saved it, slightly earlier, like, we could have been looking at a really horrible crash in that instance. And yeah, it would have taken both the Audis out. Gabby in particular could have been seriously hurt. So really lucky that that didn't occur, and I'm really grateful. And I'm grateful that Max was okay as well. So yeah, absolutely crazy start to the race. And yeah, I just blows my mind just continuing to think about it here. So wow. But super keen to hear what you guys thought about Zandvoort. Are you going to miss it? What did you think of the pit lane strategies from Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren? People were talking about tyre degradation for Oscar, but he actually managed his tyres really well, I thought, versus the decision to pit him 4 times. So, you've heard what I think. What do you guys think? Feel free to send in your questions, either via email or via DM on Instagram. But yeah, let us know your thoughts also on Monza, what we're going to see over the course of that weekend. It'll be interesting to see how Kimi goes, given the grid penalty. Interesting to see how McLaren go, noting that it's a far higher downforce track compared to Zandvoort and Hungary, which has definitely suited them over the past 2 race weekends, and see how we go from there. So if you're not already, make sure you're following along on the socials or YouTube, and the podcast will be released on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as well. So until next time, thanks for your support. Cheers.